So I figured I'd make a little talk with you guys about something, the Ford 6.7 here. And a lot of people seem to think this is a great motor. And I thought it was kind of an interesting design because what they do is on the 6.7 is instead of having the exhaust coming out the sides of the engine here, what they do is they have the exhaust coming out the valley of the engine, so you have more direct access to the turbo, so you could get quicker spooling boost with a larger turbo. I think that was what the game was on that engine. Now, one of the things that I've always thought was kind of flawed in that theory is when you have your exhaust coming down, is your exhaust is near the fender wells where there's a lot of air and it's able to cool off that heat. It has a place for it to go. When it's up in the valley, it's kind of like a parabolic type of area where it kind of is like a magnifying glass and puts the heat a lot to the turbo and to some other things that are in the valley. So I was kind of ambivalent on the idea of why that they made the engine this way. I'm going to tell you about some of the problems that my friends have had that the Ford, a friend of mine, he's towing for a living, he pulls every day, and he bought a 6.7, hoping that it would be reliable and good for his business, and right now it's in the shop with a serious engine problem, and I'll tell you about that one in a second. But his first problem when he got it was the DEF failed, and he was blowing a 3-foot flame out of his exhaust because the DEF system was plugged and not working properly, and was actually blowing flames out of his exhaust 3 feet long. He pulled over and looked underneath, and the whole exhaust system was red. So he went to a shop and they said, hey, look, you're best off doing the DEF delete. Now, if you do the DEF delete on the Ford, the factory no longer will give you a warranty on your engine, just so you know that. So along with that, they give you the Banks has a kit, and they'll put a power-up kit on your engine too. And just so you also know, this engine, you don't power this engine up. If you put any kind of power-up kits on your 6.7, it's a disaster. One of the problems with the Ford engines, the Ford trucks, is now they're trying to make them lighter weight. Well, I want you to think about something for a second. You're trying to use your truck to pull, and what's more important when you have a truck that you're trying to use to pull is it is heavy. So if the truck's heavy, what it'll do is it will pull versus the load trying to push. So it's better to have a truck that's heavy. That's why you get a heavy duty pickup 3/4 ton, 1 ton truck, is because you want to have the truck heavy so that your trailer isn't steering. You're steering the trailer, not the trailer steering you. So I always thought that was kind of crazy with aluminum, stuff like that. It just seems like the wrong way to go. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit more about, so his DEF system failed. Then they also have a issue with that they don't talk about anywhere. And you look at all the diesel forums, there's a few diesel forums that talk about this, but they have this thing called the sewing machine tap or something like that. It's something to do like sewing machine noise. And they say after you have an oil change or something like that, this sewing machine noise can come, and the factory says ignore it. Okay, well, my buddy did exactly what they said to do. He ignored it, and all of a sudden he found himself pulling the load, and all of his rocker arms started breaking or making noise. They got really loud, so he pulled into a place to get it fixed, take it looked at, and so he found a bunch of the rocker arms had heavy wear, and were not and were broken. So we looked into it a little bit further, and there's actually an update on the lifters. So this problem that you're supposed to ignore, this is a 2014 truck, so it doesn't have the turbo issue, because the earlier ones had the ceramic bearings in the turbo, which would blow up, or one of the little bearings would find its way out, and it would end up in the compression, and it would wipe out the whole engine. The pistons and everything had to be replaced. So this is beyond that engine. So it's just, you know, there's a lot of issues with this engine, and they're major. All right. So he went into the shop and they said, well, you know, your lifters are failing. What's happening is the lifter's failing, and it's something to do with the spring tension, or too much, it doesn't pump up properly or something like that. Well, I think it's all related to this. This is my theory. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but this is just my theory on this. Is with all this heat in the valley right here, what's right down in here? You got your lifters, and lifters are pretty fragile units, and they start getting real hot, and they could plug up oil, stuff like that. You could have a problem with the oil ports going up to your heads. So I thought that this was, you know, this, to me, this design is flawed. So that's just my idea. But I think that's what was wrong. But they made a recall, or not a recall, but they actually made a new updated lifter for the truck. They don't make the same lifters. They have an updated lifter. So the shop says, hey, we should probably replace all the lifters. And to do that, you're going to have to pull your heads off, because the way they're designed, it's too hard to reach them down in there and replace them. So you got to pull the heads off. It's going to cost $5,000. So plus all the new trucks, I'm not going to be discounting anybody, but just Ford, because all of them have issues with if you get any, because they have such high fuel pressures now, they have a lot of problems with fuel system, as far as if you get any contaminants in it, your injectors will go out, and they won't last, and they're very expensive to replace. So anyway, this design, I don't know, to me, I would say it's a steer clear. So if you're looking to buy one, maybe just look at one of the other brands. You know, the Dodge has this fuel system issues, and the new 24 valve. Chevy does too. I think, probably in my opinion, I like the Chevy the best. Of course, it's the most expensive. The Dodge is pretty good too, but they do have more problems with the 24 valve engine. They did fix a lot of their transmission and rear end issues in the later models, but the engine isn't quite as good as the old 12 valve. But anyway, but the 12 valve, you know, was a good engine, but the rest of the truck wasn't that great. You know, the old automatics, unless you got a Dodge with a stick shift and a heavy duty rear end, you know, then they were all right. Anyway, just this little bit about 6.7s. I just wanted to let you guys know that. Maybe you haven't run into this problem yet. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're diesel tech and you know about it. Maybe you don't know about it. But maybe look into it, because I sat out to my buddy, and his truck's in the shop and he can't get it out. I don't know if he's going to be able to get it out. It's going to be stuck there. So that's kind of a bummer when your business is pulling. He's got to go back to his old 7.3. Well, of course, more reliable truck, better engine. But they did have some issues too. A lot of issues with the 7.3 that people don't like to talk about. Same year, Duramax only had one issue, injectors. The rest of it, you know, the rest of the motor was great, just the injectors. But I'd rather change a lot of injectors than I would change pistons in the 7.3, or I would change, you know, all the oil cooler crap and all the other oil leaks and transmission problems they had. So anyway, I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.